Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the third episode of Newton Minds, our new series of moderated lectures with business leaders, academics, and Newton alumni who share their diverse insights based on their different international experiences. Today's guest is Pablo Maldonado, an applied mathematician and data scientist with an experience both in the corporate and in the academic world. With a PhD in applied mathematics from the Sorbonne University, his current interests lie around machine learning and its applications in business, society, and social entrepreneurship. In today's talk, especially, we will focus on the misconceptions about AI and automation in the post-COVID world. By separating hype from reality, Dr. Maldonado will highlight some current trends and challenges in the field, as well as potential opportunities for business innovation and entrepreneurship. Pablo, thank you very much for joining us. So why don't you start us off with an introduction to the topic and tell us, what is AI?
Thank you very much, Anna, for inviting us, and thank you everyone who is watching us, despite the lovely weather outside. AI is actually harder to define than we could do in a 40-minute lecture, I'm afraid. Roughly speaking, artificial intelligence refers to having a computer doing tasks, cognitive tasks that are normally reserved to humans, right? In a very, very broad way. And this comprises parts of machine learning, neural networks, and deep learning, which are not directly AI itself, but it's just like a subset of a subset. Artificial intelligence also may incorporate hard-coded systems, rule-based mechanisms that perform certain tasks that would normally do humans. We have many examples in everyday life. Google Translate, it's definitely a tool that I use every day. Corrections, like spell, grammar checking tools like Grammarly, those are also AI-powered. Detection of plates in the cars. So if you parked in a zone that is not yours, that little car with the camera go around you and check down the plates and send you a nice fine, or not so nice, and so on. So we live with these systems for many years already. Plate detection is a problem that is basically solved from the 50s. So it's nothing new, but the pace on which we've seen developments in the field in the last 10 years has created a bunch of hype around it and a lot of optimism, and whether this optimism is deserved or not, it's and on which sense is which is more or less the goal of our conversation today. So my original title for the talk was whether AI is coming to take our jobs, because that's also something that is mentioned quite often, especially now in the context of the Great Reset, the coming back to the reality, or rebuilding really the economy and what will happen. And when you put together this enthusiasm, let's say, for automation and the big progresses that we've seen on the past years, with the opportunity to really reshape the economy, then you have to ask, well, what's where am I going to stand? No, and that's not clear. There is, however, a short answer.
That's good.
Just no, mostly.
Okay.
But we will see on who should be worried
Okay.
and who shouldn't be, perhaps. The AI landscape nowadays can be grossly classified into four different sets of application, depending on the level of independence of humans. I'm a mathematician, so I need to have axis somewhere. So
Right.
in the x-axis, we see from less to more, so like less independent from humans to more, relying on them. And on the y-axis, we have a level of generalization. By that meaning how each particular application of AI is independent of the context for which it is created. So on the lower quadrant, we have assisted intelligence. These are systems that exist since the 50s. Those are like hardwire specific systems that can help human make decisions. So, for example, credit scoring, like banks have to calculate the probability of a customer defaulting, or have to assess whether a transaction is considered fraud or not, or have to identify plates, for example, on the cars. So these are systems that perform very specific tasks that are not completely independent of the humans, in the sense that they rely on human collection, human fine tuning, human checking, etc. Bit more advanced systems on the outsourcing side, and this is probably the part where we should be really scared of, and or what we have in mind when we think about robots taking over our jobs. That's the automation. Those are applications that of AI that are around solving manual and cognitive tasks. Like for example, there's robots that work in the manufacturing industry. There are commercials from the 70s, I think, from Fiat. That was one of the first companies that started putting robots on the assembly line, and was one of the selling points on late 70s to have an Italian car fully assembled by robots. So this was quite an achievement. If you go now to modern automotive factories, to Volkswagen or Skoda, you will see that the robots are really doing the hard work. So these are these type of applications. There's still little generalizations, so we see that these are tasks that are quite specific, right? So you cannot take car assembling robot and expect him that he will, straight out of himself pack goods in Amazon or in Rolik or in retailers.
Right. So this axis is how much humans actually have to be involved in the task with the robot or the artificial intelligence.
Exactly, yeah. So,
whereas at the end there, you just give the robot the task and they get on with it. You don't have to interfere.
The robot knows how to do, or the agent knows how to do the task, and you don't have to fiddle with it too much. And this is in contrast with the algorithms, right? So you have to still intervene a little bit and check them. And on the upper part, we have like augmented intelligence application. That's a term that has been trending for the past 2-3 years. Tried of closing up the loop with human interaction. So I have a system that gives me something to me as a human to take a decision. I take my decision, and then it feeds back onto the system to give me something else the next time to improve itself. Great example of this is Google Translate, which we've seen it become smarter throughout the years, thanks to the more translated text, more user-corrected translations, and so on. So that feedback is incorporated into the engine, and that's brought back into us as a smarter application in a way. And the let's say the holy grail and what one thinks in terms of or the idea that many of us grew up with on the 90s on what the autonomous agents would look like in the future, right? So these are Terminator and and all these systems from the Jetsons. I remember this robot that was cooking and that was cleaning and everything, right? So these are systems that would ideally be able to adapt to different situations without human assistance. This is far from existing. Most applications actually rely on the lower axis, right? So assisted intelligence and automation. Some around augmented intelligence. We see slowly incorporation of the environment and into the system to improve itself, but we are really quite far from autonomous intelligence. So that's more or less where we are today. So as we see, we are still quite far from that future where robots will just come straight away and completely replace us, at least in the sense that what one grew up thinking with from movies or whatever. Yet that doesn't mean that there are no risks into it, or that there are not areas on which the intelligence systems are able to replace humans or to complement them up to some extent. This is this picture is changing every day. There are many subsets in between, but it's like roughly a view of how the AI landscape looks today.
So this axis is describing how much the system can learn without us, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So how not only without us, but also in different contexts. Yeah? So it's very easy to have or relatively easy to have a system that solves a specific tasks, but transfer that task from a neighboring task is like completely largely open challenge, I would say. We would expect, or as for example, the Google Translate is actually quite intelligent in that sense, because the way it works is by so when Google Translate gets better in translating from one language to English, for example, and then it also gets better on translating from different languages that it hasn't seen, because of the way the algorithm works. It's relying not on linguistic patterns, but on statistical frequency of sorts of the co-occurrence of words within a given context, so that I will always find, or rather often find, pizza and tomato within the same sentence, regardless of the language. So at the time that has to be a translation, then these systems rely on those like underlying features like that are above the context specific of the language. Yeah? So in that sense, we speak of generalization, that I can completely ignore the linguistics and go to a more abstract level on which the algorithm will be capable to learn.
Right. So once it knows the word for pizza in all the other languages, it just learns the word for tomato because it tends to co-occur
yeah, exactly.
in all the other languages.
Yeah.
Right. But so, I mean, you were saying we're making a lot of progress in this direction in terms of automation, industry, etc. We can all kind of understand what that means. I mean, are we making a similar level of progress in this direction or not so much then?
Yeah, there's, I think augmented intelligence is where we are seeing more, more applications that are coming up. Completely autonomous systems are a task for the future. I was speaking a couple of years ago with someone from Volkswagen Research. They are trying to develop for some time already the autonomous cars, and they say that, well, actually it is not that hard to solve situations like roundabout problems. Like you have many autonomous cars coming to a roundabout.
Sure.
They all measure each other. You have sensors everywhere. You can, and it becomes a game theoretic problem, right? So you have multiple agents. You have to find some suitable equilibrium, and under some assumptions, the cars would be able to calculate it on real time and do it. The challenge, for example, there is coexisting with humans. That would not take an optimal decision, right? So a human will see the other cars and will not calculate the decision that leads to to the equilibrium path where the cars go around the roundabout and without crashing into each other. But then the system needs to take into account possible irrationality from the non-rational actors. So that's a big challenge for a for a fully autonomous system. Even in simpler tasks, I know, for example, one expert in grasping. He's been studying grasping of objects for 20 years.
Okay.
Which you would say, like, well, it's just taking something, and this turns out to be a completely super hard problem for robots. Like, distinguish if you have a bunch of Legos, then the robot cannot really pick up by himself the one he wants, or to grab it correctly. You have problems with the shapes, with the positions, with everything. These systems are really complicated, and this is where I think we will be stuck for a few years, if not decades.
Right. So the robot has problems with differentiating the different pieces from each other?
It's not all. So there are some challenges on the vision part, but also how to like the angle on which the hand should get in, how the fingers should move, and how to like fully. It's quite a complex mechanism if you think about it. That you actually don't think about it too much, right? It's kind of automatic for us, but this is paradoxically much more complicated for a machine than reading 10,000 plates or translating the Bible in 2 seconds, right?
Because they have to synchronize
yeah,
what they're seeing with the motor skills, right?
Yeah. So exactly. There's a lot of intrinsic optimization that goes in humans in ways that we don't really understand.
Right. So, I mean, my daughter is 11 months old now, and I read this interesting piece that teaching young children, you can think about it the way that we teach AI, the input that we give them, right? So we play with, wooden blocks, and I tell her, this is red, and this is a triangle, so that she can learn these concepts, right? Because she doesn't have the concept of color or shape in the first place, right? And I guess we teach these systems in a similar way. But then picking up, it's just so much trial and error, right? So she keeps trying, and at some point she figures it out, and I suppose that how it gets saved in her brain. So you're saying that's the big obstacle to sort of get the machine. So the machine can't learn sort of through trial and error, so they keep trying to pick it up and they don't know how to kind of use the trial and error to improve.
Yeah, well, with children or human, it's probably a combination of trial and error, but also of observing. Like,
right.
Children are great observers, and then they are able to generalize the experience. So if your daughter sees you grabbing a glass, like she unconsciously understands, like how you are moving your hand at which speed to grab something. And then when she tries to grab a toy somewhere else, that she will kind of have this in mind. This kind of abstraction is not really possible for a machine. What happens, and one way to actually tackle these problems, for example, in robotics, is through simulation. So indeed, I put a lot of Lego cubes, and your task is to pick up the red one and just like do it several times until the robot will learn the right policy, right? So so it's a combination of sensor motions at specific times that you can learn through repetition to pick up the object. But that's very expensive.
Right.
There's wear and tear, right? So the mechanisms are very fragile, like as they rely on complicated electronics. And like us, we work on very flexible, very economic mechanisms, right? You can afford to do those repetitions, and you have the cognitive engine to not do so many repetitions. Yeah, so even like the child will fall, will hit himself, etc. But will take much less repetitions than a robot to do it. So there are important differences, and maybe understanding like better how children learn would help us one way to to improve the efficiency of machine learning algorithms to teach the robots to do the same, but it's really hard.
Sure.
So
robots can't really compete with us in that sense, and it's, as you said, it's a really expensive investment, right, developing this. But maybe if we go back to your original question, so where do robots compete with us? Where are they actually better at things and maybe replacing us? Or is that one of the misconceptions that we're going to talk about? Maybe the worry, I mean, we know that they are replacing us in some ways, but is the worry maybe too strong? They aren't replacing us as much as we think?
That's machines are good at tasks that require they are number crunchers, right? brute force, the same thing over and over. Right. So translation is one that you'll not be able to compete with the machine translating a long book in that time. A recognition tasks that require very specific attention on something. That's for example, like there are some studies in medicine from time to time that show that human doctors can make mistakes that the machine will not. Like we put send I don't know 1,000 X-ray diagnosis to a doctor and to a machine, then the machine will surely guess the correct diagnostic in a higher percentage. For these very focused, very specific systems, then machines are going to beat us. More general systems is where we have an edge. Whenever it comes to creativity, then machines are still behind.
Sure.
Luckily.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk a bit more, I suppose, about some of the misconceptions then.
Sure. Some misconceptions we have about AI that I see quite often. One is that intelligent machines can learn on their own. That they really can't. For one, you need data, but then there's like the second level of misconception. And more data you have, the better it is for you. So you should all use all the data you can, and this is all you need. And this is also problematic in many ways. More data doesn't mean better algorithms. More data doesn't mean fairer algorithms. You have to always think on how what's the way on which the data was collected, how's the process that generates the data working, and what does it have to do with the task that you are trying to solve. For example, if you want to predict forecast the sales of a given object in the supermarket, and you can't just throw in the weather, the number of COVID cases in Prague, and things like that, and expect that there will be a correlation. Like you might find correlations within those variables you throw into, but if there's no causation, then you have nothing, right? So you have a nice curve that doesn't mean anything. Really. If one Google's correlation versus causation, there are like thousands of examples of like consumption of chocolate versus GDP of Switzerland or things like that, right? That have nothing to do.
Right, and we sort of intuitively know that these things aren't causing each other, whereas I guess the machine wouldn't.
The machine wouldn't, yeah, and the machine wouldn't be able to recognize it, and even if it could improve partially in some cases the performance of your model, make it more effective to solve the task. That's going to be short-lived because there's no underlying cause tying these two phenomena you observe, then you have nothing. So it doesn't really help you to throw in all the data that you have. That's there's a whole industry built around that we saw during the when I came here to Prague in 2014. It was like the peak of the big data, right? So there were all these big data companies, and it was about like who had the best Hadoop or other technologies, and now it's like a taboo word even, right? People do not want to accept that they fell into it, and that they engage in this mania of trying to collect data. Like many of the companies that started on collecting data per se, just for the sake of it, are no longer with us. So
right, because you need to know why you're collecting the data. What's your purpose?
What's the point? What's the purpose?
Sure.
It's more curation work really than just throw everything. Another misconception is that AI will only replace mundane jobs, so it has nothing to do with me as a educated university level person. And actually, this is not really true. In some ways, a person working in a restaurant is safer than an accountant. Right? Why? Because there's a dexterity problem we talk about.
Sure.
So the
robot would keep spilling the drinks, right?
A couple of years ago there was a robot barman on Cirque in Cheveote.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the robot was mixing cocktails, and it was really it took really a lot of time, like 15 minutes to mix you a margarita.
Right.
And then it had to stop after 3 cocktails because something broke up or had to be plagued or whatever. So there's no way that this will happen. Yeah. They're navigating through tables with objects, etc. It's not going to happen. Whereas a lot of the work of, for example, accountants or auditors can be automated, at least in part, or some. So like some level of automation is possible. Whether it will not be completely replaced, like the people who studied accounting don't need to scare now, but they would probably have to reeducate at some point in the future to transition to some roles where they can leverage technology better to complete their task, right? So so it's not. It's very interesting to see which roles are actually at danger, and it's maybe not the ones one would expect. Manual work will continue to be quite important. Another misconception is, and I think it's a particularly awful one in this time, is that one will always be able to distinguish AI from non-AI. We see it on the context of fake news, for example. I saw just yesterday a study that like the finding was that the people who are more confident that they will not fall for fake news are actually more prone to to fall for fake news, right? So there's like misplaced confidence. We have our echo chambers that algorithms are feeding into us. What brings engagement, what brings clicks, and hence revenue for the platforms. And then one is not really. It becomes harder and harder to distinguish what is real than what is not, like that, than what is on a fictitious reality that is fed into you to profit from you, really. So that's one big misconception I see, particularly now with all the diverging versions about how to whether the vaccine A or vaccine B, whether it's the job of Bill Gates or of other foreign actors, etc. So there's the more you carve into a certain narrative, the more you will get those biases confirmed thanks to the algorithms, and the harder it is to distinguish that this is not really the workings of an AI, that this is reality or not.
So how does AI work specifically in spreading fake news? I mean, are there algorithms and Facebook spreading more and more fake news, or sort of targeting people, as you were saying? I mean, how exactly does it feature in spreading fake news?
There are two ways. One is to, now it's possible to generate a fictive video of like these deep fakes are called.
Politicians even, right?
Yeah, you can have Donald Trump here with you.
I mean, our studio is quite good, but not that good yet.
Or other politician, right? And so that's one way. That still has glitches. It's not perfect. You can more or less spot differences, but the way the misinformation spreading happens, it's because of the metric of the algorithms, right? Which is so from the point of view of the platforms, the more time you are online, then the more profitable you are, because the more ads can be shown to you, right? So that's the metric to maximize, the time that you will be there, right? So if it takes you video about Bill Gates injecting chips into people to keep you there, then that's what you're going to get, right?
Right.
There's this misalignment between objectives of what is socially convenient and what is profitable, that create this dissonance in the people. And
so the algorithm learns what I spend time on, even if I'm just fact checking it, or I don't trust it myself, I'm still consuming it, right? And it just offers me more and more, and it creates more of that content, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this is how it fits into you. So then we get into this conflict, really, what you cannot say, like, okay, well, this is this really the reality, or was this like fed into me by some algorithm? Yeah, so that's
right, and we can't really tell
what is human or not.
And I guess that's a negative example, right? But I mean, in a similar way, when I write emails, it's offering me, the next word or how to end my sentence, right? And I just press tab and it writes the sentence for me. Gmail does. I mean, in a way, that's making my life better, right? Especially if I'm tired or whatever. I mean, sometimes I'm sort of surprised as I'm struggling to write an email, and all right, thank you, Gmail. Yeah, you actually put what I would have written if I wasn't so tired. So I guess it depends how. I mean, in that sense, we don't really need to distinguish what's AI and what was me, because it's using my information to sort of predict what I would have written, and it's helping me write it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if in this particular example they actually rely on your email history or on maybe everyone's. Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is like in this example, it's maybe you're not able. Yeah, maybe it's not clear whether it's you or an AI, but you do not confuse it with like you don't take actions beyond that email,
right?
for your life or for others. So that's it's like the stakes are lower, let's say.
Sure. Right. And we will get to questions, I suppose, about ethics, right? And when these algorithms become so complicated that most of us don't really understand how they work, we get to the question of ethics and the question of who's deciding this, right? And I guess we go back to your earlier slide of, if the systems are learning themselves to a certain extent, and they're improving the algorithm based on the data that they get fed without much human input as time goes on, then it's sort of a really difficult question of who's in charge, right? And who's sort of controlling what's happening, and then what content we get, or what effect, I suppose, it has on us. And we were going to talk about, I was going to ask you about this in terms of the impact that it's going to have now, the way we think about and engage with AI, especially in the post-COVID world of work. And I guess there's two questions, right? I mean, one is what consequences we think it's going to have and how harmful or positive they're going to be. But also if challenging some of these misconceptions is going to be really important, and what impact that's going to have.
Yeah, it's hard to say really, but I think one big one is all the issues surrounding fake news and spread of misinformation that would have to be somehow regulated, because as you say, like once you let off the beast, you have no control really on what's going on. So
right.
We will see if there would have to be some type of intervention from the government or from some other entities that slow down the pace on which the personal information is used to pursue agendas that even if they're not political, they're having consequences on the on political decisions of people in terms of radicalization and extreme beliefs. That's one aspect. And another, I think it's quite important, is that we've seen a trend of digitalization in the last years, that COVID as the main driver of innovation and moving to digital really in record time. And I'm a little afraid that that this optimism about how well things turn out to be, how cost effective, like not having the physical spaces, not having to meet face to face, not having to travel for business and so on, would not be extrapolated to replacing people like prematurely with robots. Like if you imagine that there's some car factory that has now 30-40% of the staff at home because of the space restrictions, or because of the decreased demand, or the problems in the supply chain that we are seeing, as it's not fully pumped up in as the 2019 levels. We could face really an influx of robots into the workforce, and then all these people who were like partially waiting in the limb to see what's going to happen, they might not have a place to come back to work, and that's going to be a source of social discontent. So that accelerating the digital transformation and the automation can have a pesky side effect if it's not controlled, if it's not slowed down. We will see those trends. We will see more and more the transformation of roles from more manual, more repetitive tasks to more supervisory roles. When humans are working side by side with a machine, that would make their lives safer, easier, and give more space for more concrete tasks. But to see it that quickly could be counterproductive.
Right. So when we talk about automation in healthcare, of course, during the pandemic, but I suppose in general, as you were talking about, in terms of the labor market, the British Medical Journal just published a couple of months ago a series of reports, and one of the articles was actually co-authored by the Columbia economics professor, Joseph Stiglitz. And he really warns about what you were just touching on, this difference between, technological advances benefiting all of us in the industries, but at the same time, as you just said, they can reduce labor demand. What he argues, this can increase inequality between workers and the owners of the technology. But his take is that we can sort of actively counteract this by focusing on AI complementing and helping labor. So I guess the example of the Gmail helping me write emails, but I'm still writing them, as opposed to replacing me entirely. I mean, do you see that as sort of the way to make the AI contribution sort of more for the collective good rather than to increase inequality?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that will have to, with the, I mean, cars, robots have been very useful, no? And I have very present many examples from the car industry. So, yeah, like there are, so for example, for cars, no, like you're using a lot of chemicals, and you're lifting heavy parts, and you're putting the car upside down to make a screw and so on. And you see that, and all that requires 5 people. It's a fairly monotonous job. It's very tiring because you're, like putting a lot of stress on yourself doing this movement, and you can just operate it from your cabin, right? It will require different skill set, right? It will not be just brute force, but would have to reskill a little bit. But then the job is much safer and much more satisfactory. Like giving more time to enjoy of other things. It would have to come, I think, with a shift also on the obsession for continuous innovation and continuous production that is ingrained in our economic system. But that we will see if now we would slow down a little bit. Many countries are starting to make experiments on reduced work weeks and having more time for the family and so on, so that the time that is going to be saved, or the risks that are going to be gone by employing robots in the workforce can actually benefit in the society as a whole, or we would end up in a dystopian future where we just enlarge the slave force with robots, right? But not really liberated ourselves from those tasks. So that, I think, will have to come with some deeper changes. We will see.
Right, so that we share the time saved more or less equally, rather than some people having nothing to do and others sort of still competing the way we have been before. And I guess it comes to the question of education as well, right? There has to be a sort of investment or willingness to support education if people are to change into supervisory roles, or roles in which they are able to interact with AI, because as we were saying before, it's getting increasingly complicated, right? So you actually need people to learn how to interact with it. I suppose, did you have any sort of more examples for us about the sort of impact of COVID, on the workforce in terms of the impact of AI on the world of work?
Well, not. I think this has been a trend orthogonal to COVID. COVID maybe you will just accelerate it a little bit, but the trend is there. So there are many studies that coincide that actually AI will create more jobs than it will destroy. So many jobs will be directly upgraded through more specialization, more training, etc. Will be maybe harder to get those jobs because it will require upskilling, but they will be there. Many jobs will stay. So if we look at this list in blue, so we see obviously all the specialists that will have to operate and design these complex systems, but also notably here we have digital marketing and strategy and business development professionals, right? So these are like the spectra on both extremes, right? On the very hard technical skills and on the very like soft skills, right? Really like everything related to sales and strategy that is not going to be touched by robots anytime soon. Whereas we see decreasing job demand on everything data entry, administrative tasks up to some point are more and more automated. There's scheduling tools and so on that are quite easy to use. Accounting, assembly and factory workers, like terrible, repetitive, dangerous work is going to be gone, hopefully, and so on. So we see this shift between monotonous, repetitive work being replaced by more creative work, more for that will require higher education, like bigger barriers of entry, but the job will still be there.
Right, and this is really interesting. And I suppose in healthcare, do we see a sort of parallel in terms of healthcare and the way that we've had to use automation now, in terms of visits to the GP might have been online now, and there's certainly technological development. You were saying that for certain diagnostic decisions, the machine can make better decisions sometimes over time than the person. Do you think we will see that now in the post-pandemic world, that there will be more and more impetus on this, on reducing perhaps staff in hospitals and more automation, or are we going to go back to sort of it's been quite a slow introduction, hasn't it, to healthcare and to hospitals of AI? A cautious one, I feel, if the doctors still want to have maintain some control, right? Or do you think that the pandemic has really made this created an impetus for AI to take a much larger role in healthcare?
I think, healthcare is definitely an interesting area of opportunity for AI, but there are many reservations, right? So not all the treatments are susceptible to automation. I think that will still, even if AI will be supporting as a decision-making tool, like complementing the diagnosis of experts, or offering an alternative view, like highlighting some regions that don't seem quite good on your ultrasound or your X-ray, etc. That the responsibility will still ultimately rely on the doctor. But there are other areas not related to within healthcare, not related to your visits to the GP, like drug discovery. So that's a big one.
Right.
That also requires analyzing, or exploring the very high dimensional space of possibilities of drugs that could work for some specific treatment. Analyzing the medical literature, like trying to parse out the information to see if for the symptoms A, B, and C, how they are treated by different substances, and if that would help you build a personalized treatment for you. So that's like a big, huge text search, right, across medical databases. That's another one that's interesting. And for on the aging population, I think would also be important to have, and we see it more and more. That some hospitals that are piloting like robot assistants that could remind you when to take your medicine, that could keep an eye on you. That many people that are old and live alone and cannot properly take care of themselves might need of those systems. So I think we will see more and more, even and maybe this is a good thing, even if your doctor is not fully replaced by a robot.
Sure, because that raises a lot of questions, especially when you were talking about the elderly. If they live alone and the nurse or the carer is the only person they really interact with, and then you're going to remove even that human contact. Then I guess we have to consider the psychological impacts of increasing automation as well. But we certainly don't have time for that today. Let's just see if there are any questions that have come through. Not yet. So why don't, do you have any sort of concluding comments or something that you wanted to touch on before we finish?
Sure.
And wait for more questions.
I just wanted to mention some areas where we see some potential impact of AI. One is definitely healthcare. All these applications that we discussed in automotive. I think we will see something like control tower pilots in airports for traffic at some point, right? When you have a future full of self-driving cars and you still need to pilot them somehow. In financial services, we have a lot of applications already, like personalized savings plans, credit scoring, pricing, personalized pricing of financial products. These are areas that continue to grow. That like fintech has no stopping in sight at the moment. I think transportation and logistics is probably the first that would be benefiting of the advances on autonomous driving. Maybe not, and I met some guy from a Polish startup. They're actually doing quite interesting things around optimizing, using AI for optimizing transportation, but in the big container ships. So they have much more space on the ocean, much less unpredictable traffic. So it's easier to regulate that. So that might be an interesting opportunity. And within technology, communications, media, the usual suspects, I think they're still growing strong. Streaming services, social networks, different platforms. Now with more and more privacy controls, as we see, like these new platforms have ephemeral content that disappears after some time. So maybe that we'll see some evolution in terms of how much we want to share with those technology companies, but will definitely be still there. And personalized media, like personalized content, this is definitely going to continue to grow. So
you mean Netflix is going to get better at predicting what I want to watch next? Because
hopefully, yes.
Hopefully.
no one wants to browse that much on that main screen.
Right.
Yes.
But so I guess these are some of the kind of types of industry where we already know that automation is taking place, and I guess it's just a question of how much and how fast. Are there any business opportunities in terms of AI that you think maybe people might not think of, where there's still potential for business opportunities in terms of AI applications?
I think. Well, if I had a really good one, I wouldn't share it.
Right.
But one that is maybe overlooked is agriculture. I think there's still quite some potential there for definitely for automation, for monitoring. There are many companies that are doing that, but I think there's still some space, and there's definitely a challenge also with as we face more and more the perspective of climate change, that maybe start thinking about how to grow different kinds of products in a more sustainable way, that we don't have to transport them from far away. I think that could be interesting as well to look at.
But again, it's a technology that we have to give it the input of what we want to achieve, right? So it's not going to be a solution to things like climate change on its own, right? It still requires humans to tell it what the task is.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's the main challenge now, that low-hanging fruit is kind of gone.
Right.
Right. The simple applications, simple services are gone. There's this model of the Uber for X or the Airbnb for X, creating marketplaces is overexploited, and now that we have that out of the question, it is just the really hard stuff that remains. Like in some circles, it's even called the 2 PhD problem.
Okay.
Because you need to have now a PhD, for example, in medicine and a PhD in machine learning, so that like where is the frontier, right?
Right.
And how can you tackle problem here with tools from there. So this has
Right.
become really complicated, and those are long-term investments, like moonshots. If I would have to feed my family to pay the rent next month, I would probably not bet on some application like that. But I think that we will see more and more venture capital into those long-term investments, coming back to the R&D startup machine like AT&T or Bell Labs used to be, rather than investing on a social network for dogs or whatever.
Right. Right. Well, maybe some of our students are going to bring an AI application idea to our accelerator, and we'll look forward to that. If there are no questions, I guess we picked the first sunny day after a really cold and dreadful spring to have the streaming today. But obviously, you'll be able to watch it again, and we hope that people will come and watch it later. And you can give questions, put questions in the comments. We'll look at that as well, or you can email me with questions, and I can connect you to Dr. Maldonado if you have any more questions once you watch it on what we talked about today. I guess, do you have any concluding remarks about what we talked about today? Something I forgot to ask that was really crucial?
Oh, I think we covered the topics that we had. Was a pleasure being here. And looking forward to meet you in person once this is over.
All right, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you everyone who was watching, and do enjoy the rest of the nice and sunny day. Have a good evening.